Tensions are high in Sudan as the administration of Omar al-Bashir cracks down on growing anti-government protests. Blaming an ongoing Ebola outbreak, the Democratic Republic of Congo delays Sunday's election for months in 3 opposition strongholds, further inflaming political tensions. And we'll look back at Africa's creative highlights of 2018. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, tensions are running high on Wednesday in Sudan after riot police fired tear gas on a crowd of demonstrators Tuesday as they attempted to march on the presidential palace. The protesters are demanding that President Omar al-Bashir resign. Although official reports say there are no casualties from the face-off, witnesses say at least 3 people were shot. A week of protest across Sudan was triggered by a shortage of food and fuel, plus a sharp hike in the price of bread, a staple of every Sudanese meal. Speaking to a crowd of supporters, President Bashir called those criticizing the job he is doing traitors.
I salute you all. Thank you so much for this reception, for your support, which is an answer to everyone, traitor, collaborator, mercenary. You are here from Sheikh Makki. You are answering the traitors and collaborators. We support you and we are strong because of you. God willing, we will come and visit you next year.
Now, Mr. Bashir has promised to carry out economic reforms, now to quote, ensure decent living of the citizens. Bashir has ruled Sudan since seizing power in a 1989 coup and has shown little tolerance for dissent. Bashir is wanted by the International Criminal Court in The Hague for alleged crimes against humanity and genocide for his brutal reaction to the insurgency in Darfur 15 years ago. The Islamic State terrorist group is claiming responsibility for a suicide bombing on the Libyan Foreign Ministry Tuesday that killed 3 people. There is no independent confirmation of the group's claim. Libya has been in political and social turmoil since a longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi was toppled and killed in 2011. Rival governments, a UN-backed government in Tripoli and one led by an anti-Islamist general, are jockeying for power along with a number of militias. Now, voters in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo cities of Beni and Butembo and surrounding areas will be excluded from presidential elections on security and health grounds. It's a move that appears certain to inflame political tensions before Sunday's ballot. The National Electoral Commission says an Ebola outbreak, the second worst in the nation's history, is to blame for the postponement of voting until March. The cities are known as opposition strongholds. Kizito Binhangi, president of civil society groups in Beni, told Reuters the state-controlled election commission's decision was unjustified and that residents would start protests on Thursday to demand the vote proceeds as scheduled. Meanwhile, a Catholic leader in the DRC is appealing for peace during his country's tense, volatile election period. Speaking at a Christmas Eve midnight mass in Kinshasa, newly appointed Archbishop Fridolin Ambongo called on President Joseph Kabila's government to hold their rescheduled elections on December 30th as planned.
The real peace excludes egoism, regionalism, tribalism, division, and categorization that push us apart. In this critical period in the story of our country, I invite each of you to have sense of responsibility to embrace nonviolence so we may make through December 30th, 2018, that elections will happen in peace and truth. Real peace today in our country, the peace that comes from Jesus Christ. That peace requires that elections are held on schedule on the 30th of December 2018.
Well, the audience cheered his homily, which included a call for elections to be held. Congo's Catholic Church, a longtime supporter of democracy in the country, is urging Kabila to hold elections, which have been postponed for 2 years now. Now, with all the headline-grabbing political news pouring out of the DRC, we thought now would be a good time to focus on the ordinary people of that country. Today, we bring you another edition of our series, We Are Congolese. It's about people sharing their hopes for their country and what they expect from the upcoming election. This time, we meet Ndole Kanyagambo.
Être Congolais veut dire être capable de se sacrifier d'abord pour son pays. Donc quelqu'un qui comprend le problème que le Congo traverse et qui est capable de mettre sa force, son intelligence et même son temps. La sécurité est quasiment inexistante dans notre région. Et comme vous le savez déjà, il y a cet aspect massacre qui est un élément qui est venu s'ajouter à une situation d'instabilité que nous traversons au quotidien dans notre région et dans notre pays. Aussi, il y a ces grands problèmes des transports. Vous imaginez, les transports routiers, c'est tout un problème. Et sans compter les transports aériens. Vous imaginez quitter l'Est de la République pour aller vers l'Ouest, ça nous coûte les yeux de la tête. Certains disent que, ou pour ne pas dire certains, la majorité dit que l'État n'est pas là. Donc c'est comme si nous sommes dans un pays qui n'a pas de dirigeants. Pourquoi? Parce que l'État ferme les yeux facilement, même à des actions qui demandaient que l'État réprimande des actions, mais l'État fait comme si la population n'existait pas. Ben, si j'étais président, la première décision que je prendrais serait de rétablir un état de droit sur l'étendue de la République démocratique du Congo. Et la deuxième décision serait de créer un climat de sécurité sur l'étendue de la République démocratique du Congo. Parce qu'avec la sécurité au moins, le climat des affaires suit. Et qui dit climat des affaires dit déjà le développement. Donc c'est déjà le premier voie vers les développements qui sont durables sur l'étendue de la République démocratique du Congo. J'attends de mon prochain leader une paix durable. Ça, c'est la première chose. Donc, qu'il soit en mesure de mettre toutes les batteries en marche pour que la stabilité et la sécurité soient...
Well, a German charity which says it rescued 33 migrants from the Mediterranean Sea on Tuesday has released a new video of what it says is its Sea-Watch 3 ship looking for a port of call. Sea-Watch revealed in an email statement that it had so far contacted Italy, Malta, Spain, the Netherlands as our flag state, and Germany asking to disembark. Sea-Watch says most of the migrants on board are from Nigeria, Libya, and Ivory Coast. Other migrants include citizens from Mali, Egypt, Guinea, South Sudan, Congo, and Senegal. According to Sea-Watch, Sea-Watch says its ship rescue operation occurred 150 kilometers from the Libyan coast on Monday night. Two international charities have launched a program in Malawi aimed at helping girls in rural areas stay healthy and stay in school. The charities are running girls' clubs in the Mulanje district in southern Malawi, a hotspot of HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Nearly 10% of Malawians have the virus, and the bulk of new infections occur among people in their teens and early 20s. Lamek Masina reports from Malawi.
These are some of the 360 girls taking part in Imawa Girls Clubs. The clubs were launched 2 months ago in 9 secondary schools across Mulanje district. Statistics show that many girls here drop out from school because of early pregnancies and child marriages.
Last year we had close to 26 secondary school students who dropped out, and 8% of them were girls. And all of them, some of them got married, some of them got pregnant.
Malawi has one of the highest rates of child marriage in the world. Half of all girls marry before age 18. Girls and women suffer 70% of all new HIV infections in Malawi, according to a UN AIDS agency report.
Considering that young girls between the ages of 15 to 24, they are at higher risk of acquiring HIV, we support girls with psychosocial support to make sure that they remain in school and they remain healthy.
The clubs were launched by two charities, the Global AIDS Interfaith Alliance, or GAIA, and Sentebale. Under the program, mentors encourage girls to think about their goals in life.
We've also taught them about self-evaluation, which can help the girls to rediscover themselves. This will help them know their background and set the right goals.
Loveness Sitima has her heart set on a medical career.
I want to be a nurse. I love the uniform they wear. But particularly, I want to be a nurse working in the maternity ward so that I can help women.
Others say they are realizing the importance of girls' education.
When a girl is educated, she respects the rights of other girls and also motivates other girls.
Government authorities say the work of the clubs supports its own program focusing on girls' education.
Government, although it is doing everything possible to promote girls' education, cannot do everything alone, let alone reach each and every girl child. So such interventions help tremendously in promoting girls' education.
Sentebale and GAIA officials say a similar program is bearing fruits in Lesotho and Botswana. Lamek Masina for VOA News, Mulanje.
Well, Pope Francis is urging Christians to forego the greed and materialism of Christmas and to focus instead on its message of simplicity, charity, and love. Francis celebrated Christmas Eve Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, opening a busy week for the Pope that included a Christmas Day message and blessing. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Share the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, still ahead on Africa 54, celebrating creativity on the continents. But first, a look at Wednesday's headlines.
Good for Rwanda and France to be together, and I hope the authorities who
Enfin, je veux avoir un mot pour tous nos compatriotes qui nous écoutent ce soir et vous regardent.
Could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
On our Our Voices, we're talking about the news and issues you're talking about.
Sharing stories of development and growth across Africa,
around the world, and in our lives. Topics that inform, empower, and change the rules.
It's time for Our Voices.
With me, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick.
And Hadiza Kiari.
And Ayan Bior.
And Orion Itangi Shaka.
It's time for Our Voices.
It was another contentious year between U.S. President Donald Trump and the reporters who cover his administration. The president continues to refer to journalists as enemy of the people. White House correspondent, Patsy Widakuswara has more.
6 months ago, a gunman angry over a news story killed 5 people at the Capitol Gazette. But for the newspaper's editor, the work continues.
What we do is vital to this country, vital to our way of life.
The staff of this Annapolis, Maryland newspaper is among Time magazine's Persons of the Year 2018, honoring journalists killed or imprisoned for their work.
The death of my friends changes all of our lives. People, I think, are more aware of the value of what we do. It seems like a pretty high price to pay for that.
And the price is getting higher. For the first time, the United States made the Reporters Without Borders list of deadliest countries for journalists.
Fake news and the Russian witch hunt. We got a whole big combination.
In October, a Trump supporter sent pipe bombs to CNN and high-profile political opponents of the president. Critics have accused Trump of worsening tensions by calling the news media the enemy of the people.
It's like the media's role is just to be critical of the government, so it's troubling to characterize that as somehow being unpatriotic.
The president and his supporters reject accusations that his remarks have led to violence.
The media's constant unfair coverage, deep hostility, and negative attacks, you know that, only serve to drive people apart. CNN should be ashamed of itself.
Trump has singled out CNN in particular, suspending their reporters' press credentials after a heated exchange.
That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
CNN sued, and the administration restored Jim Acosta's credentials. Another challenge, Trump's use of Twitter to bypass traditional communication channels.
You can talk to a very senior aide to the President of the United States and ask about a very serious, important piece of policy. And that person will walk you through how the administration is reacting. And at the end of that conversation, they will inevitably say, but the boss hasn't tweeted yet.
The White House points out Trump is one of the most media-accessible presidents, speaking directly to the press at least 560 times since taking office, much more than his 2 predecessors at the same point in their term.
We're not happy about it at all.
Often taking questions on the White House South Lawn.
And we're not happy about it.
President Trump seems to prefer these impromptu events rather than having his spokesperson brief the press, as previous administrations have done on an almost daily basis. In the past few months of 2018, the White House is down to about 1 press briefing per month. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
Now, press freedom is increasingly under threat around the world. According to reports by media watchdog groups like the Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders, both groups say the number of journalists killed, kidnapped, and detained while doing their jobs climbed in 2018. Here's viewers Elizabeth Chanoff.
In April, an Islamic State suicide bomber in Afghanistan, posing as a member of the media, killed 26 people, including 9 journalists who were rushing to the scene following the initial explosion. In June, a gunman walked into a Maryland newsroom and opened fire, killing 5 local newspaper staffers. And in October, Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered inside a Saudi consulate in Turkey. From kidnappings and murders to imprisonment, the threat to journalists is on the rise in what experts say is an increasingly alarming trend.
Journalists in democracies are increasingly at threat, and journalists in countries not in conflict are still paying the ultimate price for their reporting.
According to Reporters Without Borders, at least 63 professional journalists were killed in 2018. The top 3 deadliest countries for journalists are Afghanistan, Syria, and Mexico, according to the report. But the attacks aren't limited to killings. The jailing of journalists is also on the rise. The Committee to Protect Journalists says China, Turkey, and Egypt are responsible for more than half of the total number of imprisonments. Officials cited cases like the one in Myanmar, which sentenced 2 Reuters journalists to 7 years in prison this year.
They uncovered a war crime, an atrocity. And for that, they were set up by the police, accused of having stolen documents, which they did not. And now, in a mockery of judicial process, they have been thrown in jail. Those are exactly the kinds of journalists in their own country reporting on their governments that are running into trouble.
You're creating violence by your questions. You know, you are creating you. And also, a lot of the reporters are creating violence by not writing the truth. The fake news is creating violence.
In the U.S., the president's heated anti-media rhetoric is setting an example for other leaders who want to attack the press, experts say.
By calling them fake news, he's saying they're illegitimate. By saying that they're failing, he's saying they're on the wrong side of history. And by saying that they're the enemy of the people, he is saying that I am the people. If they're my enemy, if they criticize me, they're really criticizing you.
Public trust in the American press is at an all-time low in what some say is a broader illustration of an overall global decline of press freedom. But there are some positive signs of change, too. In Ethiopia, which is undergoing democratic reforms implemented by the new Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, no journalists are reported jailed for the first time in 14 years. And that's not all.
Well, we have seen some changes in the regimes in certain countries like Ecuador, South Korea, the Gambia, which have accounted for some of improvements in our World Press Freedom Index.
Yet, as journalists continue their work around the world, the latest reports signal they will be doing so in an increasingly difficult and risky environment. Elizabeth Cherneff, VOA News, Washington.
Welcome back to Africa 54. And here's what's trending. It's been a big year for fashion on the continent. Kicking off 2018 was the South African Menswear Week in Cape Town, an event that has come to epitomize what is edgy and fashion-forward on the continent. And this year was no different. In West Africa, Nigeria hosted one of Africa's biggest fashion events, attracting over 45 designers from 14 countries from the world. Despite the event's prominence, many have called for African design to be more widely accepted and appreciated on the global fashion scene. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, activists held a different kind of fashion show where disabled models took to the catwalk as part of an initiative aimed at fighting for more inclusive representation. 2018 was also a big year for African art. This year, it became even harder to mask out the lingering issue of the art looted from the continent during the colonial era. African curators magnified calls for the return of their artifacts after the Museum of Black Civilizations opened in Dakar, Senegal. Cultural centers are springing up around the continent, waiting for the restitution of the tens of thousands of stolen pieces that experts say represent 90% of Africa's cultural heritage. African artists mixed creativity with individual passion on a variety of palettes this year to help articulate some of the continent's social and development issues. And that's what's trending today. Well, the U.S. state of Tennessee wouldn't be Tennessee without country music, and the latter is hard to imagine without the recognizable sounds of the banjo. They may seem simple and easy to make, but in reality, military precision, basics of engineering, and carefully chosen materials are crucial for creating a quality instrument. Lizia Bachelet traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, to talk with 2 men who have made the complex art of banjo making their lifetime project. VOA's Anna Rice narrates.
Really, the banjo is the American instrument, and it was made by both black and white cultures came together to produce this instrument.
Together with his mentor Tom George, Christian Stanfield has been making banjos for decades. Their workshop is located about an hour's drive from Memphis. Wooden parts, strings, metal rings, and peg heads. Visitors see hundreds of small details and parts because everything is done by hand.
There are two distinct parts. There's the round part, which we call the rim. It's actually called the pot when it's got all of its parts on it. The rim is just the wood part. But you have the round part and you have the straight part, and they're made separately.
The body consists of several layers of wood.
I will resaw it into smaller pieces like this. And I'll put it in a steam box, and the steam will make it very soft. And then I will put it in this form, and it will actually be able to bend without breaking. It'll bend around this. And I will put one layer inside and another layer inside, and I cut a little joint on it so that it gets flush. And when I get 3 layers done, I take it out, I glue it all together. When it comes out, it will look something like this.
After the rim is ready, George carefully polishes it. Years ago, he taught Stanfield the secrets of banjo making. Back then, Stanfield just got back to Memphis from Washington, D.C. and stumbled upon a folklore dance party. The look and sound of banjo mesmerized the young man, and he decided he wanted to have one too.
I fell in love with the banjo. I really wanted to learn that new instrument. So I borrowed a banjo from him for 2 or 3 months, and when I was ready to get a banjo of my own, he recommended Tommy to me. He said, you know, don't buy a banjo on the internet or in a store. You can actually, there's a guy in Fayette County who builds them.
I just like to make things, and woodworking, banjos, furniture, whatever.
Tom George is one of the best-known banjo makers in America, and he knows a true passion for banjos when he sees one. When Stanfield asked to become his student, he immediately agreed.
I would come over, and his wife would cook dinner, and we would eat dinner, and then we would go out in the shop and work for a couple of hours. And in 3 months, I had a banjo that I had made myself.
As for George, he had to learn the craft all on his own.
I wanted a banjo when I was a teenager, and so I mowed yards around my neighborhood to raise money, and I bought a banjo. One that I bought, which wasn't very good, and I said, maybe I can improve it, so I started trying to improve that one.
It takes around 4 to 6 months to make one banjo, and because the neck and the body are connected at the very end of the process, the craftsman can work on a few banjos at the same time. And in the spare time, do what they love dearly, play the banjo. Felicia Bacalets in Memphis, Tennessee, Anna Rice, VOA News.
Fascinating. And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.